My name is Tiana Cherry. I'm a 2017 graduate of American University, Washington College of Law, and the former Vice President of the Black Law Students Association. So for me, the most important thing was doing the right research. It wasn't necessarily about the amount of time I spent researching firms, but making sure I used the correct resources. For example, I focused a lot on NALP, I used Vault, and I used Chambers. And those three resources were very important in my decision making because of the fact that they not only provided statistics on law firm rankings, but they also provided statistics on diversity within the firm, and a lot of times there were associates who had actually responded to questions that I was able to go back and look at to see what the work environment was like, what the culture was like, and I could sort of get an informal idea of whether those firms would be a good fit for me. So for me, I spent more time researching using those resources and can't really speak to how much time I spent, but I would say that I did my due diligence to make sure I knew the law firm names, those websites, and I was comfortable with the places that I decided to apply to. Yes, so during my summer, I actually met with a number of law firms. We had receptions throughout Washington, D.C., but I spent time attending different embassy events where I also had the opportunity to meet with different attorneys in the area. Specifically, I went to an event at the Embassy of Haiti where I met with a couple of associates, including the current Attorney General for D.C., and while at those receptions, I spoke a lot about my interests. I shared with people what I was doing during my first year of law school, and then I told them what I was hoping to practice or get some experience practicing during my summer. And that's actually how I got my first job, was after attending an event at the Embassy of Haiti. So that was quite rewarding for me, but I would say that attending those receptions were important, but it was more important to me to reach out to the alumni at our law school and really talk with them about their experiences, because I found the alumni to be a lot more candid and genuine and willing to share information with me. Interviewers want to know about you. So they want to know what you've studied, they want to know what you're interested in, but they also want to know that you've done your research and that you're interested, genuinely interested in the firm and the practice. So they will ask you questions like, why are you interested in our company or our organization? They will ask you, what experiences or skills have you gained that you'll be able to use when actually working with us? So you have to be prepared to answer those basic questions, but also kind of fill in the gaps by doing your research, using those resources like NALP and Vault and Chambers, and really drawing in on the skills that you've gained to hone in on that experience. So OCI interviews, those on-campus interviews, are really important because you only have about 15 to 20 minutes at a time to meet with 3 people, perhaps 4 in some cases. And so it's really not an interview per se, it's an impression. And so you have to use those 15 minutes wisely. You have to be able to really highlight everything that you've experienced or developed in law school in 15 minutes and be able to share with people why you would be a valuable investment of their time. So I think it's different in that way because in callback interviews, it's much more intimate. You have either it could be a half day depending on the firm or the company, or it could be a full day of interviews with one specific organization or company or firm, wherever you decide to go at a time. And so rather than really getting to know people, you have a shorter amount of time to really impress people. So after the OCI process, I had about 5 or 6 callback interviews. I think it was difficult because I was interning during my first summer at the same time that I was going and flying out to different places to do callback interviews. I think the most important thing for me was making sure that the place that I was interviewing was a good fit. And so I had one callback interview where I actually flew out to Ohio and spent a night with the firm. The first day we had a number of interviews, so it was very intense. I met with each person, there were 4 people. Each person I met with, I spent an hour with them. And then we had a lunch, and then we had a reception. But before we were able to attend the reception, we had to complete a 100-question questionnaire about things that we were interested in, scenarios, responding to questions like how would we react to difficulties that we could encounter in the firm, in the practice. And the next day, after the reception, we had to wake up at 9 a.m. for another breakfast. So it was a very intense callback interview, much different from my experience with the firm that I'm currently at. But I thought it was good because I was able to really get a feel for the practice, how close people were in that firm, and I think it shaped my decision in terms of whether it was a good fit for me. At Linklaters, my callback experience was much different, where I flew out to New York the night before my interview. I had some time to prepare, and when I met with everyone in the New York office, I want to say I probably spent about 30 minutes with each person, and afterwards the callback interview was complete, so I probably met with 4 people, and we had a lunch at the end of that interview process, and it was very nice because I got a chance to meet with the partners as well. It was much shorter than my experience in Ohio, but I would say that sort of 4-hour interview process was more reflective of the firms that I met with in New York. So I had already completed my callback interview process before entering my second year of law school. And that was very important to me because I just wanted to make sure that I was able to make an informed decision before continuing with my legal studies. If I had to sort of juggle callback interviews with still attending classes, I think I would probably spend more time trying to do Friday interviews just to make sure that I can still focus on my studies and keep my grades up. But I don't think it would be a difficult process because firms or people who are conducting those callback interviews are very understanding of your schedule. They know that you're in law school, and so they're willing to work with you. Students should really kind of take a step back and think about what they want to practice. And they should do their research to make sure that the areas of law that they want to practice are actually in the firms that they're interviewing. A lot of times I've interviewed candidates, and in those interviews people will come and say, well, I want to do M&A, but I want to work in London. And the funny thing about my firm is that we do some M&A work, but on the U.S. side, that doesn't really happen in London. And so you want to make sure that candidates and you as a candidate are well informed about the practice, about where those practices are taking place, and that you're able to demonstrate that you've done your research. So that's one of the things that I think is most important when looking into different companies. The other thing is fit. So really meet with people, find out whether we have alumni at those firms that you're interested in, reach out to them, ask them what their experiences have been, ask them what the firm culture is like, and make sure that it's a good fit for you, because the worst thing that I think for someone to experience is going into a place and they're not able to adapt or to adjust because it's just so different from what they've expected. So I guess the last thing is to be open and to sort of be willing to be in an environment where things are different, because being in a firm is very different from being in law school. And so I think you'll have to be willing to adjust and be ready for that. So those are the things I would say to look for when looking at firms and doing your research. I wish I would have known that ranking isn't as important as fit. So a lot of times we'll look at the #1 and #2 law firms in the nation and we'll say, I must go there because their ranking is so high. Or you'll look at different practices and say, well, they must be the best firm doing this, and that just may not be the case. I'm sure that if they're ranked highly, that those are great practices to work in or great places to work, but it's not the end-all be-all decision maker to what it means to be in a good practice or in a good field or good firm. So I think fit is key, and that's something that I don't think is shared enough. My last bit of advice would be early and often. Make sure you do your research and you send out your interviews early. You reach out to people often to just let them know where you are in the interview process. If they're alumni who you've worked with, make sure you follow up with them. So, be early in terms of submitting your applications on time, reaching out to people, letting them know that you've submitted those applications. So do those things early, and then communicate with your advisors or with the alumni who you know, or with whoever it is that you've been in connection with. Communicate with them often just so that they know where you are in the process.